All right, let's jump right in. Think about the smartest people you know for a second. What if I told you that a lot of them, well, they might not be the great thinkers we think they are. Instead, they're just really, really good at repeating stuff. We're about to dig into why true, deep understanding isn't really about your IQ. It's all about a few key habits you can build.
So let me ask you something straight up. Are you a good thinker, or are you just a good repeater? I know that's a tough question, right? Because of course, we all like to think of ourselves as thinkers. But the line between those two things is, well, it's way thinner than you might think. And figuring out which side you're on, that changes everything about how you learn.
Okay, so let's actually break that down. What's the real difference? Well, a repeater, they just memorize, accept what they're told, and recite it back. A thinker, on the other hand, is totally different. They're building knowledge. They're constantly questioning it, connecting the dots to stuff they already get. You know, it's like the difference between being a parrot that just mimics sounds and being an architect who actually designs the building.
And right there, that's the core of the problem. Just accepting information isn't the same thing as understanding it. Not even close. I mean, you can memorize the definition of a word or a formula from a textbook, right? But that's just knowing the label for something. It doesn't mean you know how it actually works. Labels aren't knowledge. But here's the good news. The solution isn't to just, magically become smarter. You don't need to boost your IQ or anything like that. The real path to becoming a deep thinker, it comes down to building 5 very specific, very powerful habits. And that is exactly what we are going to break down right now.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to bust a big myth about thinking. Then, we'll dive into the 5 habits, translating and visualizing, questioning and reconstructing, simplifying everything, embracing I don't know, and finally, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Let's do it. All right, first up, habit number 1. This one's a game changer. It's about focusing on translation, not just memorization. What do I mean by that? Well, real thinking, always, and I mean always, involves taking some abstract idea and making it solid, making it concrete. And this little process is absolutely crucial. So next time you come across a new concept, don't just try to memorize the words. Ask yourself, okay, what does this actually look like? If this was a little movie, what would I see on the screen? When you do that, you're forced to build a mental model, a schema, as it's sometimes called. If you skip this step, that information just floats around in your head, all disconnected and weak, basically waiting to vanish the second the test is over. Okay, let's move on to habit number 2, which builds right on top of the first one. You have to stay relentlessly curious. I mean, think like a little kid again. You know how they just ask why over and over and over until they get it? As adults, we stop doing that. Usually because we're afraid of looking like we don't know something. And that exact moment, that's where real learning just grinds to a halt. So here's your new job description as a thinker. Your job isn't to repeat knowledge. Your job is to reconstruct it. See the difference? Real understanding, true comprehension, it only starts when you can take an idea, strip it all the way down to its core parts, and then build it back up again, piece by piece, but this time in your own words. No jargon, no hiding.
And that leads us perfectly into habit number 3. Aim for simplicity. It's funny, right? So many of us think that using big, complex, technical words makes us sound smart. But you know what? Most of the time, it's just a smokescreen. It's a sign of confusion, not intelligence.
I mean, Einstein himself nailed it when he said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't know it well enough. That right there, that's the ultimate test. True expertise isn't complicated. It's clear. Hiding in complexity feels safe, I get it, but it's also the very thing that stops you from actually mastering what you're trying to learn.
Now, on to habit 4. And I'm going to be honest, this one might be the toughest of them all. You have to admit what you don't know. That little phrase, I don't get it, it sounds like failure, but it's actually the key that unlocks the door to real learning. The thing is, so many of us would rather look smart than actually be smart, and that little act, it's a huge roadblock.
The actual skill behind this has a fancy name, metacognition, but all it really means is thinking about your own thinking. It's just the ability to kind of step outside of your own head for a second and take an honest look at what you actually know versus what you think you know. It's about spotting the fuzzy parts, the gaps in your understanding.
So how do you do this? It's simple, really. Just get in the habit of asking yourself 2 questions. Okay, what parts of this do I really, truly understand? And where am I still confused? This kind of constant self-check is how you find those hidden gaps in your knowledge that your brain would much rather just pretend aren't there.
The great physicist Richard Feynman had a brilliant way of putting this. He said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. It really all comes down to that. Being intellectually honest with yourself, that's the foundation of all deep learning.
All right, we've arrived at our fifth and final habit, learning to tolerate the discomfort of being confused. This is a big one. We're trained to think that if learning feels hard, if we feel confused, we must be failing. But what if I told you it's often a sign that you're doing something very, very right?
Let's break down why. There are two kinds of learning. The first is assimilation. That's the easy kind, where new info fits perfectly into the puzzle you've already built. But then there's accommodation. That's the hard stuff. That's when you get a new puzzle piece that just doesn't fit, and it forces you to take apart and rebuild your entire model. It's uncomfortable for sure, but that's where the real, game-changing learning happens.
So the key here is to completely reframe that feeling of confusion. Don't see it as failure. See it as information. It's a signal from your brain saying, hey, we're wrestling with something really new and important here. Deep thinkers don't run away from that feeling. They learn to sit with it, to tolerate it, because they know that's where the breakthrough is hiding.
So, when you put it all together, what's the big takeaway? It's this. Deep, insightful thinking is not some magic gift that you're either born with or you're not. It's not just for geniuses. It is a skill. And like any skill, it's something you can build, one habit at a time, with a little bit of practice.
So let's recap those 5 habits one last time. Number 1, translate ideas into models you can see in your head. 2, reconstruct what you learn in your own words. 3, simplify everything to prove you really get it. 4, be brutally honest about what you don't know. And 5, learn to love that feeling of confusion, because that's where the magic happens. Look, these habits aren't out of reach. They're available to anyone who's willing to just slow down and actually think. So I'll leave you with one final question. Looking at this list, which one of these habits are you going to start working on today?